so glad to be here in San Francisco. I just flew in from New York yesterday, and it's always strange to come to a place where the lights are brighter here than in Times Square. So I'm hoping to share with you today a little bit of a concept of using blockchain to build decentralized marketplaces. And I think we have built a lot of marketplaces in the past. Uber is a marketplace, Airbnb is a marketplace, even Google with the AdSense technology is an advertising marketplace. So the question is, what do we do next? What other marketplace can we build if we were to reorient ourselves around the concept of decentralization? So before I get to that, and I'm going to talk to you about a particular application of blockchain technologies around digital art market. But before I get to that, I'm going to give you a little background about what I've done. So I consider myself 1/3 of each three things. I'm a technologist. I studied computer science at Columbia University, so I'm supposed to know how to code. But I'm nowhere as good as programmer as anybody that I work with on a daily basis. But one of the things I've actually gotten really passionate about is user-centric design and understand a way to present information in a way that allows people to do what they want to do without thinking too hard about how they're doing it. And finally, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I actually, was previously the head of R&D for McGraw-Hill Education's lab based out of New York and Boston. But before I got to McGraw-Hill, I was actually working on an education technology startup. I was a chief technologist, and we got bought by McGraw-Hill, and that's why I got there. But once I got there, I saw all these opportunities to do really amazing things with educational content, analytics, and stuff like that. And that's when I spent a lot of time working with the open source community and the Couchbase community in particular on application NoSQL technology, JavaScript on the front end, HTML5, and generally, as Chris Anderson said, distributed architecture. But if you ask me what do I do on a day-to-day basis, what I obsess about, I'm a designer and architect of digital ecosystems. This magical phrase. And what that really means is it's very simple today. If you're building a digital ecosystem, you're building a cloud. Right? You could be building a cloud of that's different level of depth, from infrastructure to platforms to application to services and software. And that's all great. And I participated in or built ecosystem in new media. When I was a part of McGraw-Hill's Business Week division, we invested in LinkedIn. And we partnered with Twitter to allow you to log into Business Week through Twitter when Twitter was 25 people. So you see those ecosystems grow into great services for people. And I'm translating that to education. That also makes a lot of sense about personal learning and what does that all mean. And I've given some talk at a previous Couchbase conference about that. And personally, I'm a musician, so while I haven't built any royalty management system or content distribution system for music store like Pandora, I've used it and I've tried to publish into those systems as a composer. And that all is pretty much well known. There are good patterns, and we've learned a lot of that about to get today. But then something happened as I was looking at, I built digital ecosystems, scalable systems. I can use these tools I've known and loved, but when this happened, when this idea of a blockchain becomes the vernacular that people talk about, I wonder, oh my God, that is a different way of building a digital ecosystem. For those of you not familiar with blockchains, you may be familiar with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is an information-like currency, a currency like info something, where you can actually exchange information that actually cannot be reputed. So I can give you a Bitcoin and I can't have it again in the future, like giving you a $100 bill. You now have it. And that allows the Bitcoin people to reinvent finance, or at least the currency part of finance, the very money market, of course. And that mind blows me, right? Nobody has really done anything, reinvented the other digital ecosystem where we have big banks and big institutions, but now finance is being approached by this technology. And it turns out the best way to make money is to make money. And in a way, Bitcoin is creating money from the ether. So we're going to talk about it in a second. But it made me realize that there is a spectrum of possibility about marketplaces, from centralized system, which I think we've gotten pretty used to today as users, as builders, especially in this venue. But also this idea that what can we build with not necessarily Bitcoin, but the type of blockchain-based data structure and consensus protocol and all the stuff that goes into making this virtual currency work at all. Could we use and learn from that and build decentralized system for things other than finance? So what else can we build with blockchain? And that question, what else, really stuck in the back of my mind. It's like, wow, I've been a participant in this digital ecosystem building for big brand and big companies, centralized, Fortune 500 company, McGraw-Hill was that. But what can I do? And this really made me dive very deeply into this blockchain world, of which I'll share you guys what I found and what I see the connection between the centralized world and decentralized world and how we can build future markets like this. So today, I'm going to quickly go through 3 topics with you to hopefully approach the understanding. One is I'm going to talk to you about Bitcoin, about how does the blockchain work for those that doesn't already know it. And I'm going to talk to you about an interesting and exciting project that I got involved in called MoneGraph, which is applying the blockchain technology to see if we can create a new market for art, for digital art specifically. And we'll get into a detail about what that looks like and why that extends Bitcoin beyond a currency into a property ownership system. And finally, we won't be in the Couchbase Connect conference without talking about how Couchbase can help scale these systems beyond what it is today. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to give you guys a crash course. And again, I'm not an expert in this, and maybe that may make me a good person to give this talk, this part of the talk. So Bitcoin and the blockchain. So there's really 2 things that I want to separate into talking about Bitcoin. And this usually confuses people when they're not separate. One is that you have a Bitcoin mental model, which is what the user perceive this technology, Bitcoin, do for them. And the other one is what goes on in the blockchain. What is the back-end infrastructure, the crypto magic that allows this thing to work? The first thing is that people understand that Bitcoin is something that you can put in a wallet and spend them. So what they don't know is that where this money come from, right? So it turns out that you mine your own money. When Bitcoin first started, you run an algorithm on your PC, and you create Bitcoin by solving puzzles. And that's today still what's going on. You may not be doing it, but someone else is mining Bitcoin from nothing, right? But the key is that you have that Bitcoin is in your wallet, it's in your possession, and you can use what's mine and spend it. And the way you do it is that you give a Bitcoin to someone else. I'm giving this to you in exchange for value, services, whatever. People have done great things with it. People also have done illegal stuff with them. But so is money. So the idea is I'm giving it to you. But in the blockchain, what happens is that enough of these people running this blockchain service or server or node have to agree that this transaction occur to validate that that actually happened. So it's almost like, when you ask your bunch of friends, I gave him some money. It's like, well, everybody in your drinking buddy said, yeah, you did give him the money. Then you did give him the money. So the proof around other people agreeing that that indeed happened made it true. So that's how payment happens. But most people are not going to really be very happy owning a Bitcoin if they can't cash it out, if they can't convert a Bitcoin into USD. Most of the situation when people say, I have a lot of Bitcoin, they usually measure themselves, and that is worth some number of US dollars. So this is what I call cloud bridging, where the blockchain itself is insufficient. So you have to actually bridge into a banking system, bridge into a way where the currency of today, right, the real currency that we use every day, becomes converted for 1 Bitcoin, and that's essentially what the blockchain is doing. People are building, taking something from the Bitcoin world, putting themselves in and giving you equivalent cash value. But actually, more interestingly, most people are no longer mining Bitcoin because it's computationally more and more expensive for each successive Bitcoin is being created to create Bitcoin out of software and power and algorithm. So most people will give a bank, Coinbase or something like that, some amount of money in USD, and they will then give you the Bitcoin that they have collected or mined, usually safeguarded by these banks. So that brings us back to the beginning. That's how people have Bitcoins. So they buy Bitcoins by giving these kind of cloud exchanges money, and then they give them a Bitcoin through an exchange algorithm. One of the interesting things about blockchain is that all the data is actually stored in this machine that's running the blockchain algorithm and storing the blockchain. But if you talk to the Bitcoin people and you call that a cloud, they were like, no, it's not. It's peer-to-peer. But essentially, it's a bunch of China running nodes and servers that actually is conducting this transaction, making you essentially validating the transaction between people and mining new coins for their own gain, but also adding to the amount of tokens in the sphere. So that's basically what Bitcoin is from a mental model point of view. So this is mine. I'm giving this to you, and then exchange this coin for me for some value. So if you generalize a little bit, there's really three words. There's a wallet that you capture and store these Bitcoin and using cryptographic formula to keep them safe. And you transfer and you exchange it for another Bitcoin or in some case other services. And then more importantly, in the blockchain, there's a ledger of all the transaction has ever occurred so that nobody can spend the same $100 worth of Bitcoin twice. And that allows it to be reliable and can be used as a currency that people trust. And done in a decentralized way. So no one company or one enterprise or one government can govern or steal from this situation without solving the same mathematical puzzles. So today, I'm going to make this more concrete and extend and answer the question of what else and say, well, what else can you build with this Bitcoin or blockchain type of technology? So instead of a wallet, we have a portfolio of, instead of money, art that I make, things I've done in Photoshop or in a video editing program. And then instead of exchanging it, I'm selling this piece of art to you so that you, as an art collector, can do it. And then instead of recording a ledger of all the transaction, this is the ownership history of this piece of art. So buying and selling digital art is kind of the same structurally as the buying and selling currency in Bitcoin. So the reason I want to dive into this is because it actually shows you some of the problems of using the blockchain for everything. So obviously, the ownership history of this art piece, someone created it and sold it to us, dealer and a collector, and the collector's consignment, and then the collector buys it. That fits very nicely with the blockchain. But what about the legal language and the sales contract and all the metadata about a catalog of the preview images? Where did all that go? So there's some additional detail for this ownership history. So a good example is that when you're selling a house, there is a deed that's registered with the county clerk, and then there's a pile of paper that you get. So sale contract is that pile of paper. And finally, the art portfolio, the actual images itself, the actual Photoshop file, the actual digital representation of that digital art. So the question is, should we put that all in the blockchain? And if you hear and talk to people in the blockchain world, a lot of people are suggesting putting more and more stuff in the blockchain. But I'm going to ask a little quiz, and there's actually a prize associated with it. What do you think, as of today, is the size, total size of the Bitcoin blockchain in terms of bytes? The gentleman in the front. 25 gigabytes. Either the person went to blockchain.info or read my abstract on the box. So you get this gift. So thank you very much. It's some chocolate that you can eat it before and get hyper before the end. Yes, it's actually 25 gigabytes, which is basically, in a room like today, ridiculously tiny. Right? So in the grand scheme of things, with all the processing power and storage and all the talk about mining equipment and crazy cooling situation with ASIC-based chip, all you're getting is 25 gigabytes of storage. But it's super important and super critical, 25 gigabytes. But it doesn't really make sense to stick the rest of these things into the blockchain. So the question is, what do we do when we have efficient storage that's small and we need to put other things on it? We built hierarchical storage interface, like register, memory, and disk, the same way. We got blockchain, so what's the other two things? So ownership history, much like the history of Bitcoin, it's growing relatively slowly, which is all the transaction and all the integers, the floating points that go back and forth. But as long as you start tracking who sold who to then in what gallery, that data looks more like JSON data, and that's going to grow terabytes at a time. And then the art portfolio, forget it. That's giant files, like Dropbox territory, where you really need those kind of binary storage that we know and love in S3 or other type of situation like this. So the petabyte keeps on going, and we can't squeeze it all in. So I'm proposing today, probably for the first time, that we use computer organization, which is how we design microchips, computers, and personal field, and today, scalable system, to divide this up into three problems. Let's put ownership records in a blockchain so that they're irrefutable, so if you own something, nobody can deny that you own them. Let's put catalog data and contractual details, additional information, which could be or could not be encrypted, and that's up to particular application design, and put it in a document database, like Couchbase. And finally, store the actual digital artwork and asset in a file store accessible via HTTP. Those who know S3's secret feature nobody talks about, it also supports BitTorrent. So you also have the ability for very popular service to be accessed through a peer-to-peer way. So that's what I'm proposing. To make it more concrete, I'm going to show you an example of how we apply this concept and also what a blockchain-based marketplace will look like. And this is probably different than the other talks I've given. If you go on Couchbase YouTube, you'll see I've given other talk in education and one in baseball, of all things, where I've already built the app. But this is so new, so like up to the minute that I want to give you guys an early preview before this is totally hit the ground, and I'll show you why some of these things are actually co-evolution of the underlying platforms. So I was introduced in my journey into the Bitcoin world to Professor Kevin McCoy, who is a leading art professor, works for NYU, tenure professor, and he's also himself a digital artist. So he makes digital art and has been shown in MoMA on these other galleries. Very, very smart guy. He presented in May at TechCrunch Disrupt in New York City with a new dash that he wants to build a way for digital artists to register the work in the blockchain so that if that movie turned into a GIF, gets shared on Imgur, and someone put it and download it and share on Facebook, that he can have claim that, one, he owns it, and two, he can sell the rights to it. And he wanted to monetize the graphics that artists are creating, unlike a painting where you can say there's only one of and that painting gets moved around the different museum. Digital file being copyable, you need some other ways of keeping track of ownership. And him and I start talking, I say, wait, this is way bigger than just keeping that. You can sell and you build marketplace and you can license and you can get a situation where the graph becomes the way we pay artists based on how it's being used commercially. That blew his mind and my mind. It's like, let's work together. And this is kind of what we're thinking currently. So this is the workflow of how digital artists can use something like MoneGraph. The first thing you need to do is create the damn art, right? So you use something like Photoshop and to create this, thing. And then once you created it, what I do after that is that I drag that file into a browser and I get a digital hash, a fingerprint of the bit that I have. And then I proceed to register that with a title, with an authorship into the MoneGraph blockchain. And that is public record. It's like submitting something for copyright registration or patent application. But in addition to that, I want to be able to also commercially list it in a catalog. Let's say we're at Western St. Francis, and there's a digital art gallery down there in the lobby. There isn't, but assume there is. Then you can say, I would like to sell the original Photoshop file of this animated GIF or whatever it might be for a certain price. And then an art collector, when they're visiting San Francisco, encounter this or decide to call the art gallery to buy it, will then say, oh, I would like to agree on the terms to transfer it to you. But the terms are what the blockchain world call smart contracts. They automatically enforces pieces of code that basically says that once I buy this, I'll give 5% to the art gallery as commission, and in the future, you will own the digital right, but the artist will also own a license to use it for personal portfolio reasons. And they could be very complicated. I'm selling partial ownership. I'm selling you the future performance bond for my work in the future. So these are encoded in the blockchain as enforceable digital executable, right, that will then allow people to get paid either now or in the future. And to purchase the rights, you will then use a wallet. And you can use desktop clients, or you can use Coinbase or BitPay, these kind of web services that gives you a way to take money from your account, either bank account or Bitcoin balances, and pay for this work. In this case, this is bought by a new dash from Kevin McCoy for 1 Bitcoin. Which is about $300. And then finally, we update, as part of the UI when you sold this, the record in the blockchain that say now a new dash, while not being the artist who created the work, is now the rightful owner for this piece of digital art. So we've just created using certain interfaces, and I will show you a little bit how the JavaScript part of this work. This idea that you're interacting with simultaneously catalog data in Couchbase and blockchain data and have it all be very seamless to end user that look nothing different than an iPad application or a website that you go to today. So this is possible, and so far very few people on the blockchain world has really pushed to actually build friendly user interfaces for people to use as if they were a website, but I think it's possible, and we will do this and show you guys maybe in the future talk in action. But what is interesting about this is that as you put things on the web, you immediately have a scalability problem. When people visit it and people go to a gallery, they need to see that painting and that preview GIFs really, really fast. So how do you do it? And it turns out that's not a particularly difficult problem to solve. There are databases like Couchbase, and there is mobile extension like Couchbase Mobile that make that possible. So recall we're thinking about building a portfolio, sales contract, ownership history. These three things actually belong in three different types of store. A blockchain for the ownership history, the document store for all the metadata that we know and love, and then a file store for the actual digital asset. What happens then is that when we're thinking about building blockchain-based application, on one hand, we can say, let's extend Bitcoin and stick more stuff in the Bitcoin blockchain. So pretend something is a zero value or something and just use the fact that there's an existing group of people, mostly in China, hosting Bitcoin assets in databases, the 25 gigs. Let's put it there. Now, those are actually massively replicated databases. So every copy of every transaction is technically on every node that runs the blockchain software in Bitcoin. But that may not be the right way to kind of stick everything into one system. It's like putting everything in a registry. That may not be the best way to do, and we've learned that from the Windows days. So there is this, I was introduced to the group of people building essentially a virtual machine Turing complete version of blockchain. So a programmable blockchain where you can go and use a scripting language to create a new blockchain very easily without having to fork the code base and do all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of like bringing what Java brought to the Unix world, where you create this virtual machine layer. And then you can script these contracts or these payment or tokens without necessarily having to reinvent or rebuild the entire system. And the great thing from a hosting point of view, from having the juice and power, is that you can have one group of people building capacity to process Ethereum transactions. This is an open source project that's crowdfunded, that for a fee for what they call gas, which is the idea that you get paid for that little bits of processing power and storage that you provide. And that can be used for all kinds of information, maybe starting with tracking a digital art market, but certainly going to other markets like music market and stuff like that, using the same set of hardware and hosting mechanism. Now, the Couchbase part is pretty obvious. Different types of verticals will run their own instance, where these documents either to store clear text and where you put security in front of it using Node.js or Erlang, whatever it might be, or you can use the wallet system, the fact that people who put things on a blockchain has to have a key so that they can control that piece of information in blockchain, and essentially use that key to encrypt the information and put it in the Couchbase, right, where all the record could be publicly available, but since the data inside that is encrypted, only the person with a key can open it. So you can run one giant bunch of, multiple clusters of Couchbase around the world and be essentially like an extended blockchain service for everybody to put stuff for a fee. But for the purpose of MoneGraph, we're going to most likely run our own instance in multiple areas and use essentially middleware to protect it. And finally, the actual asset themselves could be encrypted and put into S3 and made available via BitTorrent, so that if you buy or not, you will get a link that you can go download. Either that link is encrypted or not. So, gigabytes of crypto hashes, like cryptography text, stuff like that goes to Ethereum in a blockchain. Terabytes of JSON documents go into a document store, and that could expand as the usage goes. And petabytes of binary assets goes to S3 or BitTorrent or any other storage service. What's really great about this is that as long as we create a linkage, and that linkage could be a file hash, could be a URL, it could be a magnet link for those who use BitTorrent, we can make sure that you can go to the blockchain and figure out which address and which server you can get this more detail about this transfer. Who bought it at what time, what was the legal contract, what's the jurisdiction. You're unlikely going to stick that all on the blockchain because it would get pretty big. It would quickly exceed 25 gig if everybody is putting a lot more information per transaction. So this seems like a pretty decent way of doing it. And what's great about this is that you get the benefits of each of these type of storage mechanism. So you want irrefutability from the blockchain, which is I sold it to you and nobody can take it from me because I now own it, you don't anymore. All that excessively complex cryptography guarantees, despite being expensive for 25 gigs of storage, that people will trust each other in a trustless way, so you don't have to trust anybody keeping the peace. the mathematics of the world is helping you ensure that that's indeed what you have purchased. And then for Couchbase, it's scalable and extensible because of the scalability of the clustering software and the fact that it's JSON. So whether it's encrypted JSON or not, you can still index it and query it and find all the ways to retrieve and build these beautiful HTML5 JavaScript interfaces that looks exactly the same as what Uber has or Airbnb have, knowing that at the end of the day, you have the ability to go back to the blockchain to actually transfer the asset, but you can use current generation of technology to make that friendly. And finally, making sure that it's always available in different availability zones for file storage, and then if it's popular, you can use BitTorrent to make it even better. So this is what the MoneGraph digital ecosystem, a decentralized-ish ecosystem, will look like. But let's not forget about Bitcoin. So I'm not talking about payment in any sort. You can certainly pay for a digital art using Bitcoin, but you can use it using PayPal or whatever thing, or you can use Bitcoin within PayPal. But what's really exciting about bringing Bitcoin also into the ecosystem is that we can pay for the services that was incurred, the bandwidth, the CPU cycle of each one of the storage tier using a wallet. So as you interact with this digital marketplace, as a remixer, as a video artist using a digital art as your starting point, you can keep track of the graph of the derivative work. And instead of saying in Creative Commons, well, everybody can use it as long as it's non-commercial. But what if it is commercial? Who's going to keep track of who used what work and what was derivation? We can put the nodes and the vertexes in the blockchain, but you're going to have to build databases and search engines and analytic dashboard to keep track of what actually went through. We need to click track or look at impressions of the widgets that shows the GIFs and stuff like that. And that's when you allow a new way of paying for those microservices using Bitcoin. Now we've introduced this distributed payment system with almost no transactional cost. It will be a great way to build micropayment that way. So this really completes the picture for me on what the proverbial back end of the system. On the front end, and it's just the other passion of mine, and if you looked at my speaker bio, I'm the guy from CardStack. Well, what is CardStack? CardStack is what you just saw before. Its ability to build these mini JavaScript application that renders HTML5 that taps into a set of APIs. In this case, there's an abstraction called the JavaScript API CardStack that then talks to different mechanism. So it's like the Hibernate for the, not really quite a good analogy, but it's like an enterprise service bus for your browser or for your mobile browser within your embedded app. And what that allows us to do is that these type of cards, ownership cards, sales contract, can all be built as independent JavaScript-based application, and they yet, using the unified layer of a CardStack API, get to the data it needs to get to. And it contains four main things. It allows it to be these type of cards, these visual entities that's called cards, have access to API that allow us to render itself to different size. If you're on a mobile phone or whatever, it can change the template. It can react to action events. If I purchase, I have not purchased. If I put in my ID and not put in an ID, it can do different things. It can be an API, say, hey, let me go back to that contract and see what the sales price or what the terms are, and can use this card as a representation of what's on the blockchain and use this JavaScript as a way, as an adapter to the information of blockchain without writing in Bitcoin.js. And finally, and this is the most exciting part about cards, is because we can serialize the state of any of these cards, a contract that's half executed, a term sheet that I'm still negotiating. I can ask that JavaScript program to save a state, put that state in Couchbase, and you can come back and restore from that state and continue working. And I've given a lot of talks. I think I've given a talk at AOL, the Facebook building, and Google about cards, and from a front-end perspective, I won't go into that today, but that's the type of underlying infrastructure that allows this abstraction layer that sits between the UI that you want to build, and your team, your front-end team would certainly be able to do that today, and the new back-end that's abstracted through this layer. And for those who cares about functional programming, it's all functional, reactive, promise-based async programming between back and that. So you can imagine all this stuff going back and forth between the container, the MoneGraph system or other ones, and these cards, and the back-end is reacting as these activities are going on. So that's pretty much what we want to build. The use case is relatively narrow. The tools are relatively new, but they exist and they work today. So The key takeaway, if you guys were to tell people, I heard this guy talk about Bitcoin and stuff like that, would be really 5 things. One is that the blockchain technology, much like when I realized that this is a significant progress in building new internet application, it goes beyond the centralized cloud that we know and love and hate in some ways, that blockchain opens up opportunity to decentralize this and make this so that we can have a brand new game where new winners will come along, investors in the room, and people who didn't win in the last centralization game can win on this game. But the most important thing is that the end user having more control over the assets and what they possess is going to be the ultimate winner here. The second thing is that purely digital markets are good places to start. So it's very tempting to use Bitcoin to rebuild property ownership and say, oh, we should use Bitcoin to change the way houses are bought and sold. But digital goods has no concept of ownership. It's actually the easiest place to start. It's also the part where the concept of ownership is much more important, because in the sharing economy, nobody owns everything except the venture capitalist and the company they fund. But there are so many things where the concept of ownership can be brought back into the realm that selling and buying something could be done with intermediary. There are value to people who add a story, a narrative to any good thing to make it better. But the idea is that using a decentralized system, the people who are adding value will get the money instead of the centralized entity collecting a tax on all the Uber drivers of San Francisco. And JSON's format is going to be the public storage format. What does that mean? It's no longer what you tell the architect or your VP of engineering about. It's like, I want to use JSON behind all the stuff and nobody sees it. With the blockchain, you're putting information publicly. With the extension of the blockchain, with something like a document database like Couchbase, you're putting JSON publicly, encrypted or not. So JSON is going to not just be a way to access API through REST protocol, but also as a way to be the application data set. Much like HTML is the web, JSON is going to be the format for this decentralized internet. Scaling is still hard. Go with what's proven to scale. I think one of the things about hearing people talking about the future of a Bitcoin-based system is that they're going to basically reinvent everything that we've ever had. And that makes sense up to a point until we realize that we're still using today, when we're building cloud solution, something equivalent to a Dell PC from 15 years ago, just a lot faster and bigger. Commodity hardware is a good word. So using commodity software technology as a building block of this future is not only desirable, but it's actually really smart, because it gets you to market a lot quicker. Instead of saying, let's invent all the different way of scaling up everything from scratch so it's decentralized, think about what needs to be decentralized, what can be done in a federated realm or syndicated and replicated, and then what needs to be centralized will be left on the edges, hopefully. But the center is ironically decentralized, and that's what we have the opportunity to do in the next year or two. So, in conclusion, the 3 pieces of technology or product that you guys should keep an eye on. One is MoneGraph, which is the end-user-facing application, initially focused on the digital art market, but being a composer, and pretty much everybody I talk to, and it's like, have you guys thought about music licensing? It's like, of course, right? That's my passion, right? And that will happen. And so keep an eye on that project. A lot of great people working on it, and I'm really, really proud to be a part of this. And the second one is the open source project that I've been championing around CardStack. It's basically a virtualization layer for JavaScript so that it can go on your Android phone and then store its data and then move to an iOS phone and still be able to get the data. So it's essentially a hypervisor for JavaScript app. It's a good idea. I won't go into detail of it. Go to cardstack.io. I've given some other talks, and you can catch up on what that will look like from the front-end point of view. And finally, and certainly not least, Ethereum, which blew my mind when I heard about it. When Vitalik, who is the founder of Ethereum, wrote the paper on what he believed a programmable blockchain can do, he basically wrote a treatise on how the entire world will be reoriented around smart contracts and decentralized trust and decentralized autonomous organization. And I think he's completely right in almost all the counts. The key about predicting the future is making it happen. So by starting small, by starting with HTML5 technology in CardStack, by starting with a market that desperately is asking for a new way of monetizing it, the digital art market in New York, and then going to the other digital media form, we believe when Ethereum launch next year, We will launch MoneGraph and the card stack that uses the blockchain at the same time. I think the world will then see there truly is a new way of building markets. If there's any success story in the internet that people are really excited about, is building new markets. And we have an opportunity to build decentralized market where you, the user, not the end user, the start user, is at the core of it. And hopefully, we can make this happen using MoneGraph as a start. So thank you very much for your time. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I will give you all the updates you want, including some you don't. But the idea here is help me answer this question. What else? Tweet at me, and I would like to hear what ideas you guys have of using this architecture to build markets for the future. Thank you.
So Chris, thank you for giving such an inspiring talk, as always.
Thank you.
And thank you for being a user and a customer and keeping us on our toes.
Thank you.
And to thank you, we've got a gift for you.
Thank you so much. The human face of big data. I am the human face of big data, so I don't know what this is about. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Do we have any time for questions, or not really? Any question from anybody? Yeah, the gentleman in the red shirt. Yeah. OK. Yeah. So the question is, if we are allowing access to media in read mode, how do we prevent people stealing them, right? There's two answers. There's a technical answer, and there's a practical kind of common sense answer. The technical answer is that right now we copy images, right? But imagine you have widgets that will render the image and draw the information from the correct source, but you have to instantiate it live, like an ad unit, right? You don't put a GIF or PNG of an ad unit on the site. You run some JavaScript code, and it fetches the GIF for you, or the PNG or some JavaScript. So one way to do it is to wrap it in the widget, which is what Getty is doing. So allowing bloggers to put images from the Getty catalog into your blog, they will give you a widget of which they will know where it's being used, and that information allow them to have enough value from this embedding to give you that content. So that's a technical answer. The more kind of common sense answer is that if people want to steal your images, they will. Right? And they would just download it and find a way to rip it, and you can't avoid that. But what's interesting about this is that if I'm an artist and I'm using your digital art, which is an image in my video thing, I can steal it, or I can say, let me attach my creation, my remix, or my work into that graph so that people will know that I made a remix of Tom York's song. Right? And that may be a discovery that's value. So maintaining that graph, much like linking your web page, where you don't have to link it to anything, but linking your web page or allowing your web page to be discovered by Google is valuable. Making your free content available on Twitter is valuable because you're joining a graph, you're joining a network. So my hope is that by providing value, whether it's money or attention or whatever it might be, direct money or indirect money, into this graph, people would want to participate and declaratively, voluntarily put their information into the graph, even if you're an end user. To know that you discover an artist before he blow up, maybe you should deserve a portion of his future proceeds. So those are the things that having a type of system like MoneGraph and would allow those type of behavior to happen. But like everything else in technology, it's about who can get people to use it in a way that helps them and helps the people running it. And I believe there's a way, and we just have to find it. All right? So thank you very much for all your attention and help. Thanks.